Hi, my name is Kevin Dixon and I'm a biology instructor at East Central College, and I'm also a volunteer instructor for the Missouri Department of Conservation's hunter education programs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to field dress this deer. This deer was taken this morning by a bow hunter, and I'm going to field dress this deer as quickly as I can. It's very important to field dress deer as quickly as you can do that for a couple of reasons. Number one is the spoilage aspect. We want to make sure something doesn't spoil. And number two, we want to get it cooled off as quickly as possible. Some very important things with field dressing. One, we want to try to keep things as clean as possible. We don't want to get dirt and bacteria in there. And number two, we want to do it as quickly as we can to get that cooling process going. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the back. I'm going to cut down to the pelvis. I'm going to open up the skin. Then I'm going to use a saw to open up the pelvis. Then I'm going to work my way up the abdominal cavity, up the chest cavity, almost to the neck, and then pull the internal organs out, hopefully all at once. So I'll hopefully walk you through this one step at a time. So grab my saw here so it's handy. One of the things I like to do when I do this is try to have everything as close to downhill as possible, just so that things are going down away from me if I can. So I'm going to start at the midline. If at all possible, get as close to the middle as you can. I'm going to start at the midline and I'm going to cut all the way down to the pelvis. This deer was taken this morning, but it's still very, very warm, so that's good. We can get the get the cooling process started here very quickly. So I'm going to cut down to the pelvis area and then turn my knife over and I'll start making my way up the skin from the inside. One of the things that we want to do is make sure that we don't get into the internal organs. This deer was taken by a bow hunter, and I'm afraid this deer was gut shot, so we may have a little bit of a mess when we get in here. We'll have to kind of wait and see. So I'm just going to go under the skin up to the midline. Unfortunately, we can see some of the internal organs kind of hanging out here, so I'll have to cut around that when I get there. Okay, so we have a little of the internal organs that are exposed here, so I'm going to cut around that as I go up the chest, and then I'm going to get through the belly wall after I get through all of the hairline. You can kind of follow the line. You can see where the midline of the hair is right here. You can kind of follow that line up through the chest. This is a lot easier to do when the deer is a little fresher. This one, I don't know, as I mentioned, I don't know how long ago it was that this deer was taken, but it's a little stiff already. So, get up to the top of the chest and get around these organs. I don't want to cut into these organs because it looks like intestine and there can be a lot of bacteria there. Okay, next step. I'm going to go through the muscle wall here. I have a little hook on my knife. It's called a gut hook, and it works really well. Once you get through the hair, it works really well to get through these things. So I'll get down here to where I've cut before. Pull the organs out of the way, and then right down to the pelvis. Okay, so I've cut down to the pelvis, and what I'm going to do now is use this pelvis saw to open up the pelvis. And I want to try to get as close to the midline as I can. There's a line of cartilage here. I found it. There's a line of cartilage there that if you can hit that cartilage, it'll just pop right open for you. Then spread it as much as you can. One of the things you also want to watch for with this deer, it's not a problem, but sometimes the urinary bladder will be full of urine, and you have to watch that you don't burst that when you do this. Okay, so abdominal cavity's open. Now it's time to open the chest cavity. What you'll do here is go alongside the ribs. You can't go through the breastbone, but if you go alongside the ribs, again, there's cartilage there, and it's not that hard. Just have to put a little muscle into it. If you're not going to mount a deer, this one wouldn't be mounted. If you're not going to mount a deer, it doesn't really make that big a difference how far up you go. I like to go up as far as I can. Then I'm going to spread the ribs apart. Lots of blood in here, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So, next step, this is the diaphragm. So, I need to cut away the diaphragm. I need to do that on both sides. Next step, I want to go as far up in the neck as I can to try to get as much of the windpipe and the esophagus as I can. So I like to pull things free as much as possible. It's a messy job, you can probably tell. So I have the windpipe and the esophagus in my hands. I'm going to cut that up here at the top. And now I'm ready to just pull everything out. And it'll mostly come out in one batch. I have one last thing to do down by the legs, but mostly comes out just in one big batch. All right, next step. I need to remove the lower part of the large intestine. Many folks will start by cutting around the anus. I don't like to do that, and that's just, to me, that's a microbiology thing. I don't like to contaminate my knife when I'm very first getting started. So what I do is go down underneath and free it away from underneath. Coming from the sides, and then basically down to the tail. Free up everything, cut that away. Now, literally just pull everything away. Then trim things up as needed. So in this case, lots of fat here. I like to get rid of this fat. Get as much of this out of here as we can. Check to make sure I have everything out. And that's it. All right, so our next step is we need to drain as much blood out of the body cavity as possible. So literally, I'm gonna pick her up by her front feet, drain as much of this blood out of here as I can, and then, next step, since she was somewhat gut shot, next step's gonna be to wash it out really, really well. That's where we'll pick up later after we've washed it out, then we're going to skin it. That's field dressing your deer.